Thank you for joining us today. If you are not an ATA member, please consider joining at https://atalink.org/become a member. Welcome to Seminar 8, Game Changer, How to Revolutionize Your Maintenance Organization Without Additional Money or Manpower. The views expressed in this presentation are those of the speaker and do not reflect the official policy or position of the United States Air Force, the Department of Defense, the United States government, or the Airlift Tanker Association. Please take advantage of the question and answer feature in Teams to submit your questions anytime during the presentation. There is no need to wait until the end of the presentation portion to submit your questions. Also, make sure to like questions by clicking the thumbs up icon. That way we know what you want to hear about.
Okay, so let me kind of set the scene of what we're going to get into so that we understand where we're at. So it's the summer of 2018. I just taken command, and I'm going through my normal influx of meetings to get me brought up to speed on everything that's happening in the group. And one of the meetings I was sitting through was what's going to be happening within the wing and the group in the next couple of years. And as we talked through that discussion, it came to my attention that we were going to inherit 19 additional aircraft. We were going to grow roughly by 200 to 300 people, which is all great news. And as we kept going through the briefing and kept talking about what we were going to do, the questions started to come up on all the extra maintenance that was going to happen. And it very quickly came to a head that we were going to have a lot of additional requirements that we were going to have to accomplish as we got those 19 aircraft. We were going to go from a normal 14 periodic inspection flow to 30 by FY21. We were going to go from 20 900-hour inspections to 30 900-hour inspections in the same given year. And we were going to go roughly from about 100 or so HPOs all the way up to 260 HPOs in that same time frame. And which was probably the biggest number of all, which gave me the most pause, was we were going to go from 3,000 or so pre-flights, which is the basic thing that we do every given day on the flight line, to over 6,000 for that same time frame. Lots amount of work. And so you say to yourself, well, that's not bad. We're getting 200 to 300 extra people. We should be able to handle that. But those 200 to 300 extra people were going to be predominantly 40 to 50% brand new off the street 3 levels that we were going to have to not only utilize in our workforce, but also do some sort of training. And it was at that point that we realized, hey, so what's the plan for all this? What have we done to posture the group and posture the squadron so that we can take on this work? And it very quickly came to my attention and to everyone in the room's attention that we had a lot of work to do to get there. So fast forward now to 2019. It's the summer of 19, roughly about a year later. And we had started to dabble in some theory of constraints, some CPI events to try to get after those things that we talked about in the summer of 18 when I got here. But we at that point got lucky. The Air Force decided that they wanted to start a new movement within our career field, within the maintenance world, of trying to use theory of constraints methodologies, using the depot examples of the art of the possible, and try to figure out how to do that at wing level. And our group, inside of the 92nd Maintenance Group in the wing, were chosen as the Air Force pilot organization to take on the task of breaking this down and then implementing and executing this at a wing level. So we got partnered up with the Goldrat consulting firm. They came out and spent 6 weeks with a core team of about 30 to 40 people rolling through those major consumers of non-mission capable time, our periodic inspections, our 900 hours, and our hourly post-flight inspections, and try to figure out how can we do those better so that we can possibly increase aircraft availability. And so it quickly came to our attention, and to everybody's attention for that matter, that we weren't going to have a problem in terms of just aircraft in order to increase that aircraft availability. Our constraint, the thing that was going to keep us from being more efficient and more effective in generating those aircraft, was going to be people. And so started the journey that we were going to have of how to get from 63 aircraft, an additional 19, 230 additional people, the training, all those inspections that we were going to have to do, plus all the daily day maintenance and all the daily day flying to get that aircraft availability. So my name's Colonel Michael O'Connor. In the next 30 to 40 minutes, we're going to actually bring you through that journey of just how we revolutionized our organization to produce more aircraft availability without any more money and actually with just a little bit more manpower. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we're going to talk about, and we'll go over the basics of theory of constraints and really how it was applied in our group. We'll then talk about a concept called focused logistics, which is for us the evolution from theory of constraints to how it looks like at Fairchild. We'll go through 3 case studies. So this is the why. The case studies will be the how. The how we actually applied that and some of the goodness and some of the benefits, results that we've gotten out of it. And then we'll end with what I call commanders learned, lessons learned. So these will be things that as a commander or a leader, as you try to implement these in any size organization, some of the things you have to be aware of, some of the pitfalls you can avoid to help get this going as quickly as possible. So what is theory of constraints? Think of theory of constraints just like this. You have an organization, and how much stuff can you get through, and what are the constraints that keep you from producing that? So what you want to do is you want to look at every organization as a system. So what's a system? Basically what it means is, it doesn't matter where you work, doesn't matter what business you're in, you're going to have a system. You're going to have stakeholders on both ends of that system. You're going to have stakeholders on the front end. For us, it was the Logistics Readiness Squadron and Operations Brethren who are giving us parts, and they're giving us requirements. They provide us those things when we ask them to them. We are now interconnected, right? We comes into us, and we go ahead and we create something out of it. We either fix an aircraft or we get an aircraft ready to go do a mission. And then on the back end, after it goes through us and the maintenance group, we push it out to our customer, which is the operations group. And they utilize that aircraft or that capability for training sorties and to produce sorties and mission sets for Air Mobility Command. So even though you have this integrated system and there's dependencies and variability inside of this, the one thing you can improve to get that to operate at an optimal state is flow. So think of flow as this. Flow is how much stuff can you get through that system? How many things, widgets, whatever it is in the business that you work in, can you on any given day push through to meet the customer demand? We looked at flow and how to improve flow through 3 basic concepts. The first was low work in process, or WIP. So for us, we wanted to concentrate as many resources that we could on as few tasks as we could in order to get it fixed, focused, and finished. So remember now, we talked about earlier, people is our constraint. We don't have enough people for all the jobs and things we want to get done on any given day. Multitasking, which is what we normally would do to make this work, is the enemy of theory of constraints. You want to allow your folks to focus in on fewer and fewer tasks, get them done as quickly as possible to the level of quality that you want with your right amount of people. By doing that, you want to go ahead and say, okay, there's less tasks in less areas on less aircraft, and we get those done right away so we can get those back to the fight, and then we start to work on those longer and larger constraints that are going to be there on any given day that you're going to have to spend time on anyway. We then put into a process thing called full kitting. So what full kitting is basically having all the things you need at the point that you are going to do that task at. So think about it in this very easy example. You're at your house, you're going to hang a picture. So normally, like all of us, we put the picture down wherever it is we decide we want to put it, and then we start to gather the things in which we need to do that task. If you're like me, you'll go out and you grab the hammer, and you might even grab the screws or the nails or whatever it is, and then you realize, I forgot something. And you go back out and you get the other thing. And then you start going and you realize, I forgot to get the level. And then you go back out. So after a while, you're going back and forth. It's like 30, 40 minutes before you even get started. If you had kitted that, taken the 10 minutes, walked out to wherever all those things were, put them all into a box, bring them out to the site of where the picture's at, and then hung the picture, think about it. You now go from a 30-minute to 40-minute job down to a 10 or 15-minute job. So now you're 15 minutes faster, all because you started the job with all the things you needed at the time you needed it. We then pooled resources. So like I said previously, people was our constraint. So how can we make it so that we have all the people that we need on any given day that we needed it? So we pooled them. When we say pooled them, we broke up this construct of having a variety of people in what we call aircraft maintenance units, which is our subunit under our aircraft maintenance squadron. And we pulled them together. So we made 2 AMUs, one with all the crew chiefs that we have available, and one with all our specialists. So what that did for us by pooling those resources is we avoided silos of excellence as much as possible, but we also had all the people that we needed on any given day. And the goodness is that is we were trying to mitigate or eliminate work stoppage. So if I don't have a person because someone's on leave or there's a family emergency or whatever that was, and they're no longer available, I now had all of the people who were available. So I'd have a bench to cover down on that 1 or 2 instances on any given day. What does that do for you? It enables you to make sure that the work you have to get done gets done at the time you need to get it done. And then finally, we scheduled with aggressive taskings with a buffer. So what does that look like? Think of a 5-hour job. So you have a 5-hour job, and you know it's a 5-hour job, but your folks also realize that it could be a 10-hour job if these things happen, because we all have experiences where it happened. Most notoriously in maintenance, we will schedule to the 10-hour job just to cover down on any mistakes or any issues that might pop up. But unfortunately what that is that's worst case scenario planning. What we want to do and what this drives us to do is best case scenario planning, the normal planning. Hey, that task only takes 5 hours in any given day, and most of the time it's even less. So we plan to that, and then if it goes long because the aircraft boats, the part that we expected was bad, whatever it is, the circumstances that come up, we can cover that. We go, okay, we're going to go longer, and we go longer, but we can explain it. I can explain it to my wing commander or my ops group partners as to why it happened. Folks who work for me can explain it to me, and then it gives us 2 things. One, it makes us actually look at our process, say, hey, was our process too fast? Did we not look at everything that we need to do? Maybe expand out the expectation for that fix. The other thing it allows us to do, it allows us over the course of time, if we're planning to the right times, to actually add more work, to not miss opportunities to do more things in a day. Remember, if I would have planned for 10 hours, that would have took up that day, and it would have kept me from doing other things I need to do. If I plan for 5 hours, I can actually plan more things into my day to get after. And if the aircraft boats, we can slowly mark off the ones we were going to do, but I'm still going to do more than just that one task. So we realized, though, that was only day-to-day goodness. We were changing the day-to-day part, but how can we make this last? What things could we do? What do we have to change in order to make this last past my time frame so that this could be something that would be long-term? We realized at that point that we had to change culture. So how do you change culture? Changing culture means you have to get everyone in the organization involved and bought into what you're trying to do. This started out, quite honestly, as a top-down type thing. Yes, we got people involved, and there was some goodness in there where they came up with the ideas, but it was really for myself and my leadership team that was making us move in this direction. What we wanted to transition to it in the last 3 to 4 months is really what we call focused logistics. And what this is how we get after the culture change. It's the part of how we make it so that this is a guiding light, a framework for all of our folks to look at. If we're going to do something, what is the framework in which we're going to get after that initiative or that change so that it will last past a personality? So the biggest thing we did was we sat down and we said, all right, we got to formulate clear goals as to why we're doing this. What is going to be the expectation for what we're changing so that we have a measurable goal in which we can get after? If we're going to do anything in this group, we're going to do it based on our theory of constraints baseline, and we're also going to look at other CPI tools and innovative ways of looking at it. So constantly trying to drive that innovation into everything we're looking at getting after and changing in the organization. Then take the 5 minutes and create a strategy. So we are all A-type personalities in maintenance. We want to get after our problem as quickly as possible to get on to the next problem. Sometimes what that does, however, jumping into the middle of that fire causes us to have to go back and do rework, which is another enemy of theory of constraints. So we want to create a strategy going in. 5 minutes of planning could save us hours of rework. And even if that strategy doesn't at least last past first contact, we at least have an understanding of what it is we're trying to get after and the things we need to do so we can get after it more effectively. Understand the organization and the culture. This is huge for us. In my organization, we are partnered up with our Air National Guard partners, 2 different cultures. We need to understand how those operate so that we can both utilize our skill sets and the capabilities we have to the best that we can. We also have to understand the cultures of the organizations around us. We have customers, the ops group. We have suppliers, logistics readiness squadron. We need to understand what their culture is and their expectations are so that we can move those into our initiatives when we try to blend them together. Remember, we're a system, an integrated system, and in an integrated system, you have to understand what each other's wants, needs, limitations are in order to make it work. Synchronize projects and policies. So just like I talked about, if I'm going to have something I'm expecting from a provider, from a stakeholder, they need to understand what it is I need and when I need it, and then I need to understand the limitations or what they can do in the time frame that they're asking. If we synchronize our projects and our policies so that they work together and not against each other, we're more than likely going to be able to get to a better situation than we presently have. Engage airmen and leadership in all of our customers is just what I just talked about. There's got to be a lot of communication, which is the last part, to make this work. You're going to have to talk and have a conversation over and over again, both across the table to your providers and your stakeholders, but also within your organization. But what that communication does is it makes sure everybody is on the same sheet of music before we get started. And then it also opens up communications lines so as things change, both within your organization and the ones around you, you're more likely to talk about it and make agile changes so that your process can continue on or even get better in most cases. And if we do all that, really what we're trying to get after is this. What I want to do, what our group wants to do on any given day, is put an airman with the right skills and the right capabilities at the right point in time to produce combat power. If we have a plan, we know the plan, we execute the plan, and then everybody around us at least has an understanding of what it is we're going to do, we're able to do this because it's all about this. But if we don't have the things here, this isn't going to happen when we want to. So now I just talked about all the why, like theory behind it. And so now what I want to do is talk about the how, which is really what everybody's interested in. Okay, that's interesting with the theory, but how'd you apply it? So the first thing we applied it to, if you remember back in the beginning intro, are periodic inspections. So when I got here, I asked, hey, what are the two biggest consumers of non-mission capable time for aircraft? The two biggest consumers, the biggest was my periodic inspection process. So remember we were going to move from about 15 to 24 to 30 in a 2-year period, right? If you look at it and you say, okay, how are we going to change that? Well, we looked at it and said, in order for us to do that, we have to do our inspections in 18 days. Now, where did 18 days come from? We looked at a 365-day year, and we took out all the weekends and all the vacations and all those things that we want our folks to have leave and spend time with their family, took them out. What we were left with was 241 days of actual work time, available work. When you do the math and you say, here's all the things we have to do in that time frame, we came up with, we have to get a WIP of 18 days. Those are calendar days. We then looked at it and said, how can we make our process? If 18 days is the goal, what does the process have to look like in order to be able to be done notionally in 18 days? And so we figured out that we had to stagger within our areas man loading. So man, people, the constraint. How do we stagger that in there so that in any given time, the right people and the right amount of people go to where the work is, they fix, focus, and finish, get the work done, and then move on to the next task. And then we had 3 points that we wanted to do kitting. So like we talked about before, kitting. Kitting is having everything that airman needs before they get to the job. So when they get to the job, they get on it, they get after it, and they finish it. All in the time frame in which we're asking them to do it. So then we talked about resource pooling. Again, people being our constraint. And that part when I talked about the basic concepts, we applied it. Here's a small team. So our periodic inspection is broken up into 4 areas. Okay? In those 4 areas, we can only have so many people. So we figured we need to figure out what do the teams look like for each one of these? What does it look like against our critical path? And then for everyone else that's assigned, how do we utilize them so that on any given day they're available to help us? So when you look at this drawing, you see we have very few people in the areas and all of these what we call floaters. What this does, there is, on any given day, let's say Area 1 gets behind. They're behind for whatever reason. What we can do now with these floaters is I can take some portion of them and move them to the work to help get Area 1 back on target, back on critical path. Once that's done, they come back out and they support another area or they support the periodic inspection dock as a whole into making sure that they are poised and ready to do not only those days' tasks, but the next. So I use that pool smartly to always keep myself either on time or ahead of schedule as it goes through. And then we schedule to aggressive scheduling with buffers. So 18-day calendar day schedule, this is what it looks like. It's a 4-phase process. We put buffers in between, and it's based off of the 18-day notional schedule and then historical, how long which phase should be. Now, again, an aircraft can vote in any of this. We really, as a group, can only control about up to here. We can control the pre-check, and we can control the inspection dock, and that's it. After that, it's all dependent on what the aircraft presents and what we find in here. If the aircraft doesn't present a lot of things that we have to fix, then we can really move through this as quickly as possible. If the aircraft presents something bad or it's showing its age, then we have to expend this out and we'll eat into our buffer. But we guard the buffer as dynamically and as ruthlessly as possible so that we don't give that away, because we realize as we start to go through any given day, we may need that at the end to push it out. So the results, the money slide as I call it. So we started off with the basic bat line. When I showed up, the baseline was 52 days. That's how long it took us to do any periodic inspection any given day. So remember I talked about we kind of dabbled in CPI before the GoRat team showed up. So through our first revamp, we lowered it by 20 days. And that was with just looking at the process. We weren't very good at it, but we were enabled enough to get after it that we were able to do that. The GoRat team showed up, and we came into that 18-day schedule. And in that 18-day schedule, this was based on the target of what we thought we could do it. So we have been working at that now for roughly about 9 months. Since that time, we have gotten down to an average of 13 days. Now, we've had aircraft go longer due to showing their age and things that we needed, parts that weren't available, wherever that is. But when the aircraft didn't vote and we were able to control our process, over the course of the last 6 to 7 periodic inspections, we've been able to do them in 13 days. That's a 75% reduction in time doing that inspection. Think about it. That's more aircraft that we can get back out to the fight on any given day. With, again, no more people, in fact, less people, because we realized during COVID that we could do this better with less people that provided more touch time on the aircraft to produce the combat power that we wanted. So if we looked at this just in big picture aggregate, if we would have stuck with the 52-day baseline and we would have tried to done 30 inspections, we would have had to have had 1,560 days available to us to do it. That's how long it would have took us. And that's basically sticking to a 52-day schedule. In the current average, right, we figure that we can do roughly 465, that in the same period of time in 465 days. So when you say, well, hey, we've reduced it by roughly 1,095 days, that's awesome. But hey, Colonel Connor, 465 days, it's 100 days over a normal year. And I agree with you. What we've done, though, is because we've got to get good at this, done this a little bit faster, we've actually created the capacity to do more in this fiscal year. So we've pulled periodic inspections to the left and started to do them earlier, so that when we get into 21, which we're starting right now, we would have that capacity, that extra days, that extra spot to do ISOs as they pop up. So we're actually ahead of schedule, which has been great. So the second case study we're going to look at is the hourly post flights, the 900 hours. These are our in-between inspections that happen between those periodics. The 900 hour happens just like it looks like, 900 hours, and the hourly post flights are something we do every 60 days. So this one we do a lot of every 60 days. This one we get after usually within about 18 months to 2 years. So using the same methodology as before, we created a low WIP plan for both inspections, all scheduled work. And we tried to use a low WIP for unscheduled work too, but we stuck with this just for the schedule. And this is happening in our AMXS, Aircraft Maintenance Squadron. So the first thing we do was we slotted it out. Previous to us doing this and looking at it, we would put inspections haphazardly through any given day of the week. Now, you can say, what's the big deal? And I would agree with you, but think about this. Let's say I put 4 inspections on Friday. We weren't bouncing that off of the fact that Friday was going to be one of the heaviest flying days of the week. So not only did we have to figure out how to do 4 inspections, which took us quite a long time, and I'll show you in a second, we'd also have to generate all those sorties. So what we ended up doing was either not being able to accomplish everything that we'd scheduled, or we had to move things around or put people on 12s or change a bunch of things just to make that happen. What we realized after looking at the data was if we slotted them out and we made sure we only had roughly 1 to 2 at the most on any given day, we would be able to manage not only the scheduled inspections that we have to do, but also the flying that we owe to our operations group here. We also said, hey, let's start these at midnight and not during the actual flying day. Why? Because we had more capacity on the off shifts than on the day shifts due to requirements that we could get after these. So again, lowering the amount of work being done at any given day at any given time, getting after it at our point in choosing. So then we said resource pooling, same thing as we did previously. We went ahead and put a group priority schedule together. So what that group priority schedule looks like is basically how a pro super on any given shift is going to decide as things dynamically occur, how are they going to manage each one of those things in a way that sticks to the plan. And then we're going to assign all the resources across our aircraft maintenance units to get after those priorities as we have. So this is what the priorities look like. It's within a 24-hour period. It's a tool. Every one of my pro supers have this, okay? And they look at it. If things are starting to go awry based on what the plan was that they were given for that shift, they look at this to figure out what do I have to do and what's the most important thing I have to do it in the way that I have to do it. So flyers for the next day are the most important thing for obvious reasons. And then we step through all those other non-mission capable consumers all the way down to unscheduled maintenance. So if an aircraft lands today at 3 o'clock and it is not flying for, say, 4 days, it might not be touched until we have time to get after it because of the other priorities in front of it. Now, for some of you out there, that's a really scary concept because you're used to getting after it the moment it lands to get it fixed. But think about it. If I don't have enough people in my group to do everything I need to do, and I have to prioritize, at that point, at that moment, it's going to be a low priority. Now, as we get closer to the flying day in which it's going to fly, it will move up in the priority, and we will then adjust resources to get after that. So, like everything else we talked about, you scheduled aggressive scheduling. So in our case, for an hourly post-flight inspection, within those guys in that core team I talked about in the very beginning, they said, hey, if we were just going to look at pure process, it should only take us 8 hours to do that inspection. Now, we then took in the data that we have, and we looked at what does historical data tell us? And it tells us that actually that inspection over the last 3 to 5 years has been lasting, in worst case, 16 hours. So we created an 8-hour inspection time frame with an 8-hour buffer. So what that means is my guys will work to an 8-hour ETIC, and if the aircraft presents or something pops up that keeps them from doing that, just like last night, we decided to do training. So the training, we made a conscious decision to do training, and that drove into our buffer. Totally okay, because it's a deliberate thought process that was added into the plan. We then looked at the 900-hour and we said, okay, what does that look like? Again, in pure process, 16 hours. And then based on the historical data, but ironically, another 8 hours of buffer for a 24-hour period. And by doing that, we got to these results. So when I got here, we were doing our HPOs in 48 hours. Now, it wasn't 48 straight hours of work. It was 2 shifts, 8 hours a day, getting after it. So if you think about it, 16 hours. So it was really taking us 16 hours to do this job, but we were actually having aircraft down for 48. Sitting down in that room, we said, you know what? Even if we wanted to do it in the full 16 hours, it never really takes us 16 hours, and we worked it to that 8 and 8. What we have been averaging as at this point is a 10-hour hourly post-flight inspection. So as our folks have gotten better at this, remember we do this every 60 days, the more touch time, the more muscle memory, the better you get at something. We have actually, without the aircraft voting or doing anything different, if everything looks normal, pushing these out in 10 hours, which is an 81% decrease, improvement from what we started 2 years ago. In our 900-hour, we set that baseline, 72 hours. So like in the HPOs, we did the same exact methodology. We had 1 shift over 3 days that would just concentrate on that. So that means you had 2 full shifts on each day where we could have been doing work on this that we weren't, just sitting idle. When we got in the room, we said, hey, what should we be doing? That we decided we were going to make it all one continuous work. 16 hours with a buffer of 8 for 24 hours. Now you're going to look down here and we can say, what are we actually at? And we're at 38 hours on average. And I'm going to tell you, the reason we're doing that is we found some large breaks on those days, which has been skewing our data. But there's also been a lot of learning because these don't happen very often. And so each time that we've done this, we've had a different crew trying to get training on it. And so because of that, it's pushed us out a little bit longer than what we'd like, which is our 24. But if you look at it compared to what we were doing it before, it's still a 48% decrease in time than what we were doing. This will go down. We're starting to get and understand this process better and better every time we do it. And we anticipate this continuing to get down to that 24 hours. So like our last inspection, when you add all that together and you look at it in the big picture, if we were to stick to the baseline of 48 hours, we were going to have to do those 260 inspections that I talked about. We were going to need 520 days to do them. It's not 520 days in any given year. With the reduction that we have, where we're somewhere between 10 and 12 and a half, depending on any given day on average, right? We're going to do 260 and we're going to do them in 132 days inside of a year. So we've already got us inside of a year doing something we do all the time. And I anticipate as we do more and more of these, we're going to actually get even better at it. We're actually getting so good at it that we're adding more work into those inspections. So if the aircraft allows us to get it done in that 8 hours, and there's 8 hours left, we're coming up with a menu of items. We're calling it bundling, where we're trying to figure out, hey, what else can we do in that time frame? And we'll get after more maintenance. Why? So instead of having an aircraft broke today and then broke again 3 days from now, we bundle it all together. And when we push it out in 16 hours, we got a lot more done and a lot better aircraft available to ops. Then you go down the 900 hour and that 72 hour initial baseline, and you do those 31 inspections, we would have had to have 93 days in a year just for this inspection. Even if we stay at the 38, which I know we're not going to do, and we do those 31 inspections, we've reduced it to 49 days. So we've already saved 44 days in the year, even if we just stick at what we know now is not optimal and not where we really know we can be. If you look at all those together, that means we have 432 days that we're going to give back basically, right? So that we'll have opportunities to fly those. So the third thing we looked at is structure. So we realized if we changed our processes, we couldn't just leave our structure the way it was. We were going to have to figure out a way to make sure that, like we talked about, that limited resources, which was people, are put in the right place at the right time to do the right job, to do all those things. And so we looked at what were the three influences that would keep us from being able to do the goodness that we were looking at. And it came down to our production staff, our aircraft maintenance unit leadership and how they utilize and deploy those people, and then the training both from our maintenance training section and then the training that these guys allow them to do on any given day. So let's start with production. Production historically has been inside of the aircraft maintenance units, the AMUs. And so they were concentrating on trying to get stuff done for a given number of aircraft with a given number of people. What we decided to do was we need to make sure that they have access to everything and make sure that their task, their whip, was a lot smaller. So we threw, instead of having aircraft broken out across all of our AMUs, we threw all the aircraft in the middle. And we said everybody's going to have access to every single aircraft so that on any given day you'd be able to make sure if there's an opportunity to fulfill something, we could. So that was the first thing we changed. We then took the actual production people and we put them all together. So by putting them all together, we were hoping to increase communication, which was the biggest thing that we found in our core team that sat down and tried to figure out how to do our processes better, was the biggest limb fact as to why we can't produce more aircraft. And by making them sit together, talk, interact, integrate, we've realized that we were going to be able to synergize a lot of our efforts a lot more effectively and efficiently in a smaller period. And then we broke them down internally to fewer tasks. We lowered the whip inside of the production staff so that we broke them out into two areas. One was going to concentrate on generating the sorties, and one was going to concentrate on fixing things, both scheduled and unscheduled. And by lowering and breaking out into two separate sections inside of that production staff, we were going to lower their whip and give them more opportunities to focus their attention on smaller stuff, but get really good at that smaller stuff. We then moved down to the aircraft maintenance unit. So for those of you out there who don't know what that is, they're basically in pure construct, they're like an HR department. They're the folks that should be caring and feeding for those airmen, making sure they have all the tools, the times, the techniques, the training, the access, and all those things on any given day. So they, however, historically, like everything else in maintenance, focused on production. And the people part of it, which for me was the most important part, was lacking. So we eliminated production. We said, hey, you are no longer going to look at production. That's what their job is. And so we lowered their whip and said, you are going to just look at how you manage your people and manage them well. Make sure they get the training they need. Make sure they're available. Make sure the right amount of people are available. And make sure that the shifts that we're going to use those people on are manned correctly. And then we looked at training. Now, training both internally and externally. So we said, how can we make our training more agile so that it meets the needs of the aircraft maintenance unit who is trying to meet the needs of that production staff? And we worked a couple of CPI events to try to figure out how can we schedule better, how can we be more agile, and then how can we cover down on things, gaps that we didn't know we had when they present themselves. And then by synchronizing these three pieces, we know that we're going to be able to get to that point like we talked about, right people, right place, right time, right training to produce air power would all be done. So we created a Thursday meeting. So this is pretty new for us, but we think it's going to have huge value, where this group of folks get in a room and they look at next week's schedule. And they look at the schedule and they say, okay, we have requirements in terms of the maintenance, ops has requirements for us. How can we balance those two things so that on any given week, training doesn't suffer at the expense of production and production doesn't suffer at the expense of training? And that these folks understand the requirements for both, because these are the people providers. And they know that, hey, I'm going to give a certain amount of folks here, and we've made a decision to push a certain amount of folks to here that might not have been there before. But what that's going to do for me is it's going to really deliberately give me the opportunity to train all those new people I talked about over time to close that gap I'm going to have in training. This is a brand new concept for us, but we see huge benefits in this because we've taken away a lot of the noise that fills a normal day to get our folks focused on what we feel is important for them. So what's the payoff? So if we look across FY21, we think we're going to get an overall savings when you add the days, strictly the days of cutting down and making our inspections more proficient, 1538. So when we did the normal, when we translated this, and this is an approximation, but it is based on data. It's based on the normal flying, historical flying of our ops group, the historical piece and parts of how we do inspections and where we put them and how we utilize aircraft in any given schedule. We think we're going to look at it about a 488 sortie, potentially sorties available for the upcoming fiscal year. Now, whether or not we can utilize them is another story, but these are opportunities that we never realized we had and only got by looking at our processes and figure out how can we get better at them so we can take down days. So now we're going to talk about the lessons learned. So the biggest thing I could tell you if you're going to get this started is you got to establish a strong core team. That core team has to be made up of not leadership. That core team has to be made up of the people who do the job on any given day. It has to be those folks that are at the point of contact that you're trying to get inputs from, that know what it takes to do that job. Put them in a room and give them the freedom to decide their own fates. When I went into this room on that very first day, the thing I told them before I left was, the only thing that's going to constrain you is your imagination. Don't try to put a square peg into a round hole. Look at what it is we want to do and then say, man, if I had everything I needed, this is how I would do it. Because that's how ideas are generated. We then looked at leadership, and we're still doing this. So you've got to get the buy-in early and often. When I mean often, into the third year of my time here, we're still doing this. I just had a conversation this morning with one of the commanders about this. How do we get leadership and management buy-in? Because we're going to change some people's realities here. And change is hard for people. We're going to look at what we call the frozen middle, and they're going to say, hey, we've been doing this forever. Hey, sir, I've been doing this for longer than you've been in the Air Force. And it works. Why are we going to change it? Well, we have to get their buy-in and explain to the why, the bigger picture. The fact that tactical level decisions can have strategic impacts without them even knowing. And we need to be conscious of that. And then the fact that we're trying to integrate everything together. So I'm a New England Patriots fan. So they have a system, right? You can hate me if you want, but they're pretty good because they stick to the system and they pull pieces around them that fit into the system, and the system works. So what we're trying to build in that focused logistics is just that, a system of how we do business on any given day so that we can get after the things we need to get after. Attack what you can control and get early wins. Every single one of you out there is going to have grand plans, and I appreciate that. But unfortunately, grand plans take time. And a lot of time, since we're a very reactive society now, right? So everybody lives into this. I can get instantaneous feedback off of this. I want to see stuff now. So if you can get early wins for the things you can control, and then after you get good at it, start to influence the things you can't control, customers that are outside your organization, policy that's outside of your control, you can get after that by showing the goodness in which you've got after. And then, hey, if you let me do this, or you give me this, or you change this, I can do even more. You're more than likely to get those wins at a bigger place. Aggressive goals and the willing to break the status quo. Commanders out there, leaders out there in the industry, what you have to do is you have to be okay with blowing up the Death Star. So if you haven't seen that movie, right, it's basically you got to be able to just throw a grenade in the middle of the room and let blow everything up, and then afterwards go back in and figure out what it is you want to get after. Don't get held back by status quo. Don't get held back by what you think somebody's going to allow you to do. Get after what you know you want to get after, if it's going to give you those wins and it's going to make it better. And then set aggressive goals to get after it. I'm okay in my group knowing that we're never going to get to the level that I want us to, but if we don't get into the journey, we're never going to get there. Remember that one step forward to change is one step closer to making it happen. And so you've got to get after that on any given day and really break that status quo. Let your folks break that status quo. Let them make mistakes so that you get the buy-in, and then also they realize, hey, we're going to try to make my life better. At the end of the day, this is all about making the lives of your airmen better, one moment at a time. Break old management paradigms. So no one in my group finally says, well, this is the way we've always done it, because I really don't care. Like, so we have to realize that stuff changes. Our Air Force changes. Our new chief of staff came in and said, we got to go faster. So in order for us to go faster, we have to break these paradigms. At any given day, we have to really look at why are we doing something. If there's no value added to the organization, stop doing it. Now, that's hard because you got to change hearts and minds, but you got to give them the ability to do it. And then if they falter, make mistakes, pick them back up, coach, mentor, and then send them on their way. And then finally, communicate. I do a lot of communicating. I spend a lot of my free time walking around answering people's questions about why we're doing things. This whole thing that I've just talked about has been, for some folks, a huge life change. And they don't like it. Or they like it, but they don't understand it. Or like anything else, an urban legend's been created where Colonel O'Connor said something, and then that it's been totally not what it was been intended. But in a large organization dynamics, there's a lot of filters. And when it finally gets down to that airman, it is not anywhere what you wanted. You weren't even in the room when it was said, but it got attached to you. Why? Because you're the person that's trying to drive that down. By communicating your vision, right? Setting a clear vision and then getting after it and then talking about it, after a while, you'll start to see that this will be a grassroots program. We've gotten to the point now where some of our lower end airmen have actually started to take on a lot of this inside of their work areas of how can we do this better? And they're actually pushing a lot of the small tactical level initiatives that their individual shops are getting after. So success factors. This is kind of the roll-up slide for everything. Like Dr. Gorath said, if we don't at least change one thing, then we're not getting anything done. We're not going anywhere. So we're just going to keep in that vicious cycle he talks about at the top. So for you leadership out there, this is the pyramid that I would recommend you follow. First of all, you got to get a consistent education and mentoring for everybody in your organization. Don't just walk in and say, let's make change, because there's going to be learning that they need to have. This is hard. I fortunately am a trained Air Force black belt, right? So I've gone through the school. I'm working on my certifications right now. So I have a lot of education that I need to pass on. But I realize I have immense amount more experience than the average airman. So you're going to have to figure out, how am I going to educate my workforce to get them up to some level of speed? And then we need to mentor them along the way so they continue on the path. When it gets hard, be there to get them back on the path and not let them go back to what they were doing before. You need to recognize all of the cultures and the relationships within your wing. I am a TFA, Total Force Associate Organization. I have a guard partner that I work with every day. I have a wing. I have multiple customers. I have the weapons school here too. Multiple customers all trying to vie for the thing I'm trying to give them, which is aircraft. And I need to recognize their needs. I need to recognize their limb facts, and I need to recognize what I need to get after them so that way they can do that. I need to build a core team. So don't make it don't allow your airmen to think that these changes are coming from some group of folks in a dark room who are just trying to nefariously make plans. Right? That's not what it needs to be. And I know you know that, but that's what a lot of cases they think. This needs to be them. You need to drag them into the room, whoever them is, the folks who do the work, and have them get after the problems that they have. And then give them the time, give them the money, figure out how to move your money to give them the space, the tools, the cool technology in which they can get after their problem. And then you or some portion of your leadership team needs to continue to have vector checks, active vector checks. So if they're in the process of doing an initiative, don't wait till the end to then sit down and make a decision. You need to be part of, or someone needs to be part of that journey so that small corrections can be made in the process so that by the time you get to this decision, it's not really a decision. It's just a nod of the head saying, looks exactly like we've talked about since day one, let's press. For me, I personally have been involved in all three of the things I talked about above because I'm the one who's asking them to do that. So I spent the time in my schedule, and it was hard, and it's still hard, But I spent the time going out, sitting down, and walking them through vector checks as they develop stuff, as they look to get new technology, as they have ideas. And so that way I keep them on the path of what the vision is. We are starting to step back from that now that it's been matured a little bit to allow the squadron commanders and the chiefs and all that middle management to do those vector checks themselves. So by the time it comes to me for this, it is packaged in exactly the way you would expect it to be packaged. So now I'm going to open it up for questions. The biggest thing I can tell you if you listen to anything in here is you've got to just throw something on the wall and get after it. Theory of constraints is doable in any organization. It doesn't matter whether it's a support organization, a flying organization, the wing staff, your HR department, your finance department, whatever it is and where you work. You can apply the concepts that we talked about everywhere. It's about understanding what's keeping you from being effective and efficient. It's what's keeping your folks from doing their job better. It's what's keeping them from coming to work every day thinking about, hey, I could do this, but I could also do this. If I did this, it would make my time more valuable. Value added to the organization is what we're trying to get after at all levels. You can do this through your organization. So if you don't have anybody there, you've never been down this journey, my folks in my office, please call them. They are more than willing to sit down and talk to you. We have briefings. We have some education things that we have that we can give to you, or we can actually provide it to your organization to help you get along. A lot of it is just about that. Getting folks to understand, adding some sort of awareness of what's going on, and then saying, okay, let's walk you through how to do it. Please do not hesitate to call them. Or look me up on the global. You can call me or email me, and I'd be more than happy to come out and sit there and talk to you on the phone, come out in person and kind of walk your leadership through what we did or anything else. We're super excited about this. We're pushing the Air Force in this direction in the front end of it, and it is just awesome. We could see our airmen every day starting to get better and better at this, starting to realize we're adding some stability back in their lives. And if we can add stability back in their lives, just think about, we'll get that airman to stay, right? The more airmen we get to stay, the better our workforce is. The better the workforce is, the more things will get done in the long term. Thank you.
What a great presentation. And now we will transition to the audience questions. It is my pleasure to introduce Colonel Michael O'Connor, Commander of the 92nd Maintenance Group at Fairchild Air Force Base. Hello, Colonel O'Connor. Do you have any comments before we begin with the questions?
No, ma'am, I'll let us get started on the questions so we can utilize that time smartly. And then at the end, depending on how the questions go, I might add something.
All righty. We do have a lot of questions. Let's start with this one from Anonymous. How did the change in process affect the airmen? Did morale improve or did stress increase? Any effect on profiles?
So from a profile perspective, I can't really attach whether or not this had anything or any effect on that. I can tell you from a stress piece, so I won't lie to you that when we started down this journey, there was some folks in the organization who this did add some level of stress, either positively or negatively. Like anything else, and I said in the presentation, change is hard. On any given individual, it affects them differently. And so for those folks who were looking and yearning for change, they were all about it, and it was a positive effect. For those we asked to do things differently, for those that we asked to be accountable now for things that we wanted done, it was really hard for them. And in some cases, it forced us to make hard managerial decisions about what we were going to do with them in the certain positions they were in. But I think overall, it was positive. And the morale right now, depending on who you talk to, we just did an exercise the other day where we've actually put this focused logistics mindset and methodology into use of how we were going to do it. And I went around and personally heard from my airmen saying, wow, this new process that we have in place now has made this so much better. I can get my stuff done faster. It's more organized, and the stress and the chaos that normally happens as we go through that exercise was lessened.
Sir, I lost your volume. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, ma'am.
Okay. Next question. Maintainers love being efficient, but we also like to see our families and maybe even have a hobby. How much of the efficiency are you returning to us so we can have a 8-hour day plus a lunch hour maybe?
Yes, ma'am. So that honestly is probably the biggest piece we've learned from this journey is just that. It started out as an aircraft availability exercise of trying to figure out how to get more of it. But we quickly realized as we went through this really came down to a human being factor. How can we add stability back into the lives of our airmen by better utilizing them through any given day? And so one of the things we really looked at was how can we almost slot time and manufacture a structured way of utilizing them through their daily tasks. And so we've gotten to the point now through better understanding our processes of trying now to figure out how do we actually forecast the day? What does a day look like? And so I have a team right now in the process of looking at what is a normal shift. If a normal day shift, if we say it's going to be from 7 to 4 in the afternoon, working backwards from 4 o'clock, how can we make it so that we can give our airmen some stability and understanding of what their day is going to look like? Give them that lunch that they expect or want every day that we have been historically not very good at giving them, so that they come into a work at a certain day. There's an expectation for them to be ready to go on the flight line at a certain time, that the production staff who's picking them up and going to push them out to that line has a certain expectation of how they're going to utilize them. And then quite honestly, at some point in the day, to use a rudimentary example, almost like a factory, we're going to have a knockoff time. So if I say the knockoff time is going to try to shoot for is 3 o'clock, where before that do I go out and understand where every one of my folks are so that I can say, hey, find a good natural break point in your day, in that task you're in, so that I can get you back into the AMU, back into your office space, so that you can turn in your tools, so that you can do that GO81 and all the documentation that still has to happen, so that I can get you home plus or minus 30 minutes from an expectation. The other part of it is that we talked about in the video. If I understand what my workflow looks like for the following week, I should be able to predict out where, and I understand where my manpower is. I hopefully can predict out the days that I will need more manpower available because of tasks available. So if I look at a day where we're going to have a lot of people on vacation, a lot of people in training, and my workforce for that day for you name the specialty is going to be smaller, I can tell that group of folks for that shift, hey, plan on next Thursday being here for extended times because we're short manpower that day, but we have a lot of flying and a lot of scheduled maintenance due that day. Versus what we do now, which is very reactionary. That afternoon of that day, I look at everybody and go, hey guys, we didn't get done everything we thought, so I need you to stay later. What that then drives in a lot of cases is that airman missing out on something in their life, their daughter's recital, that date night with their spouse or that anniversary with their spouse that they now have to switch, because every one of our airmen are great airmen and they're going to lean into the mission set as much as we ask them to. But over time, we vote with the family when it comes to whether or not they re-enlist. And what we want to make it is that if we can make their lives more stable and give them more predictability in how we utilize them, then that family unit will vote to stay in the Air Force for another assignment or for 2 more assignments for that matter. But I think if we can we're really going to work hard for that for the rest of the time I have remaining in my assignment here to really understand and utilize that airman better in the time that we ask him for the workday.
Great answer. Thank you for that. Here's another one. Is there a way to get a copy of the slides for wing level discussions?
Yes, ma'am. So my 2 folks that were at the end of the presentation, they have these slides available. We can push them out to you. If you're wanting to get a hold of me on the global, we'd be more than happy to push those out. And then we can kind of walk you through the bits and pieces on that so that you'd be able to utilize those at your own wings. Yes.
Sir, I think this should be the last question. When you lowered the priority of unscheduled maintenance, did you notice positive or negative numbers in your metrics, such as mission capable rate or 12-hour fixed rates? If they were negative, did you get buy-in from your leadership?
So I will be upfront to tell you that I have been super lucky for my leadership, both on the ops side of the house and on the wing side of the house, of allowing me the leeway and the space to try to do this. So I've never gotten pressure from any of my wing leadership when we weren't performing, or we at least perceived not performing, from following the metrics. But quite honestly, if you look at my metrics, my mission capable rate since we've done this has not gone down. It's actually stayed steady or gone up over the last 9 months. Our 12-hour fixed rate has not been affected. And the reason being is because by, like we talked about in the video, by being able to get after stuff quicker and getting those things done faster, the jobs that take up a lot of that space that cause that 12-hour fixed rate have been taken care of. The longer breaks, I have been a victim of longer breaks. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you, but those were longer breaks based on not the fact that we're not doing them right away, but more or less from some sustainability issues, some engineering issues that I needed support on, and some one-time flights, some depot engineering levels repairs that I have to go out for. But I have not seen a drastic swing of metrics over the last 9 months that would cause me to have to change anything we're presently doing. Is there any other questions?
No, that was our last question. Do you have any other comments?
Yeah, just for the group at hand and everybody out there, I can sit here and tell you that this has probably been one of the most rewarding and dynamic things that I have done in my career. Our folks this is hard. Change is hard, and moving an organization as large as mine is to just something that is just not normal. That last question was one of the biggest things that I had to overcome as we started this journey. What are we going to do when somebody tells us we have to get after something that's just sitting still? And my answer to them is, if it's not needed and it's not necessary, why am I going to use that precious resource to fix it when I have all these other things I got to get after? Our goal here, and the biggest thing where anywhere you can use this, is how do you utilize whatever it is to minimize that constraint? If you look at my brethren at Ellsworth, who is also doing this process, this journey, they have more manpower than they have aircraft. So their constraint is the availability of just sheer numbers of aircraft. So their journey is different from mine, but it's still along the same thing. How do you change heart and minds? How do you change people focuses of what they're going to look at any day? And so that we're moving together as a unit. We want to all row in one direction. If your unit, your squadron is successful, right? So if the AMXS is able to produce the aircraft that the ops group wants, then that makes everyone successful. But if only one AMU is successful within that AMXS, at the end of the day, we're not going to get all the sorties out there that ops needs. The wing's not going to be successful in the aggregate, and then AMC is not going to be successful in even a larger aggregate. It has to be a one motion, one movement throughout your group. It has to be looked at as a group effort. Using both squadrons. In our group, we now have a bench, and that bench includes everybody. If we have a individual available with the skill set to do that job, whether they're in the AMXS or MXS, and they're not engaged in maintenance, they're available to do that job. That took a while for us to get there because of silos of excellence and historical kind of fence lines of how we do business. But right now, if I have my folks in my fuel cell shop are all tow trained. If we are needed to tow an aircraft to fuel cell and AMXS doesn't have enough manpower to do it in that given night, my fuel cell folks get out of their building, come out and actually tow the aircraft to their building to get the work started versus what we historically do, which is wait. So the more and more you get the ground level to buy into this, to give them an opportunity to control their future, to showing them that you're willing to help them make their daily lives better, you will get the buy-in that you want, and you will move forward and see a lot of the results that we have seen in our organization. But you have to get after it, and you have to allow your folks to fail along the way and not get upset when it doesn't turn out the way you want. But the biggest thing you need to be willing to give that space. And if the leadership's willing to give that space and the airmen know you're serious about it, they'll get after it.
Well, thank you, sir. I really enjoyed your presentation. You did a great job.
Thank you,
That-
ma'am. I appreciate it.
That concludes Seminar 8.
The views expressed in this presentation are those of the speaker and do not reflect the official policy or position of the United States Air Force, the Department of Defense, the United States government, or the Airlift Tanker Association. If you are not an ATA member, please consider joining at https://atalink.org/become a member. Thank you for participating in our virtual presentation. Please close this window and return to the agenda on our website to view another presentation.